What's happening, everyone? Welcome to another LIFECAST. Again, massive thank you for all the feedback we've had so far. A couple of weeks ago, we put out a video asking for some suggestions. We got loads, and this week we're going to pick up on one that my friend Anna sent all the way from New Zealand, a very good friend of mine. Don't actually know what the title is going to be for this because it's a bit of a weird one, but it's all about basically aging parents. You know, how we all feel that we're all getting a bit older, our parents are there, they're getting older as well, and they potentially won't be there one day. I think that can bring up a lot of anxieties, a lot of fears, a lot of sadness, a lot of uncertainty, and it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on it. So we have some drinks, please.
Yeah, go on. It's a really interesting one because when you said it, I'd not, a lot of the time I think about some of the, or we've discussed, and then people say, oh, why don't we discuss this? And we've already said, oh, that would be a good one, parent guilt or whatever, imposter syndrome or whatever. But this one had never been mentioned. And when they said it, I thought, it's so obvious. It certainly is something that affects me constantly, and I'll tell you why in a bit. But I think it's really good that we've put it out for people to put in, because it wouldn't have been one that I'd have got around to be honest with you.
No, I want to take this moment actually just to say a massive thanks. You know, we've done 11, this is the 12th LIFECAST now. The feedback from some of these pods I've had more than any of the ones. I mean, just on that video alone that I put out, there was only over 60 suggestions of different things to talk about. So it's been great to see all the feedback. On this particular one, it was my good friend Anna, so a bit of context. Anna won't mind me saying, but she lives over in New Zealand and has got parents who are getting on a little bit now. But she spent most of her working life in Europe, and she's through the pandemic she moved back to New Zealand, and now she's at this point where, you know, she's a young woman, her life was pretty much in Europe, but now she spent the last couple of years in New Zealand with her family, with her parents, who are getting a little bit older.
Yeah.
And now it's this kind of guilt of, do I stay with my family in New Zealand or do I go back and live my life? And it's that kind of, and it just got me thinking then about my own life. And my mum sadly passed away, but I've got my dad there, he's 60. And it's like, I don't have that same guilt that Anna's dealing with, whether it's, you know, New Zealand or Europe. But I weirdly get this guilt of, you know, if I'm going for a beer to watch the Liverpool game and the lads are going to this one pub and my dad's going to the other, I invariably try and, you know, bring them together, say, Dad, come here or there, because I do have this guilt of wanting to spend time with them, even though sometimes I'd rather be with the lads or I'd rather do something else. There's been loads of times where I've felt this, like, I guess it's not a parent guilt, a child guilt or something, whatever you want to call it, where it's like, do you know what I mean? And I think now that Anna said it, you know, we've just said it, maybe it's something that we all suffer from. I don't know.
Is it a guilt? Is that how you would?
Yeah, to me it feels a little bit guilty if, you know, if my dad says to me, you know, look, I'm going to watch the match, you fancy it, and I've already got plans, I'll be like, oh, come on, you know, and I'll feel this guilt of thinking, oh, not that I think my dad's going to die next week, but it's a bit like, well, he's not going to be here one day, and, you know, do you know that thing? And
do you think there's I'll tell you my story in a minute, but do you think that comes apart more powerfully because of losing your mum at such an early age?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe I look at him and think that obviously he hasn't got my mum there type thing, so maybe I've got to be there for him as well. Maybe there's that goes with it. But what you're saying there, no, I do think it is a guilt. And yeah, you know what, you probably are right. It probably did stem from only having one parent. I don't know, it'd be interesting to know.
Do you feel anxious too? Because I'll tell you mine. My granddad was like my role model as a kid. So I'd go to the match with my granddad, and when I was 13 and he died, I wasn't like, you know, like I wasn't upset as a 13-year-old kid, because I don't think I really knew I still don't think I could comprehend that he was gone. I don't know what it was like for you. There's a bit of, obviously, death in this. But I don't know, I think you're quite resilient at that early age. But it's as I've got older, it's left more of a mark with me than what it did at the time. So I find myself on this rat race to be as successful as I can, because there's a regret that my granddad, who was my role model, never got to see it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so from my family, I was the only person that went into higher education. I was the only one that kind of got out of the village that we lived in. So, and all the things that I kind of did or do, sometimes it's with regret that my granddad never got to see it. So because I've still got both parents, so mine's different than yours, I'm on this like frantic, anxious journey to get as far down the line of my journey, so that in the eventuality that my mum and dad go, they've seen as much of my life as I can. Does that make sense?
No, it does, yeah. And what's so funny is we've both got kind of completely different views on this, I guess. Maybe because I did lose my mum early on, I've kind of gone along the lines of just want to kind of, like, I don't know, be there type thing. And you're a bit like, I want to show you, look how well you've done in raising me, and look at me now. Which is, it's weird, you know, situations can make you look at things in a different way. But I can totally see it from your point of view. I mean, does it fill you with sadness when you succeed in various parts of your life that your granddad wasn't there or isn't here to see?
Yeah, it does. But I kind of move that sadness into, well, you've got to do it before your mum and dad go then, you know. And sometimes that has been, you know, as you know, because we've talked about it before, I've been and suffered from anxiety, and a big part of that, quite a big part of that, is trying to show people, you know, or trying to let them live a different life whilst I'm here. And that means by me being as successful as it brings my mum and dad along the way. Do you get what I mean? Yeah. And I always have these feelings of, well, what happens if I go from there to there, but they're no longer part of the journey back there? I wonder how sad I'm going to be when I look back when I get to there. I have those feelings a lot.
You're one of them as well. You said to me in the past as well, you know, a big driver for you, and you mentioned it then, that brings you a lot of joys when you get to see your mum and dad experiencing, you know, some of the kind of fruits of your success. I mean, as well as being a massive driver for you as well, do you ever get anxiety that, you know, they're not going to be here forever? Are you one of those people? Not that you constantly think of death, but I mean...
You know, I watched, it's funny this, because I'll answer the question. I've got to ask you the same question. I sometimes sit there and think, how am I going to cope when one or both of them go? And I think I watched a Matthew McConaughey, I think it was Matthew McConaughey thing not long ago, and it was on Instagram or something. I'm sure it was him, or it might have been a Jordan Peterson thing. And what they talked about was, like, when your dad goes, you all of a sudden become the hierarchy, you become the, you know, in the olden days, you'd become head of the family. Slightly different now. But effectively, it's almost like the passing of the baton. And you have to behave like that. And I remember watching my dad bury his mum and dad. And I remember thinking, how on earth are you just completely, I mean, holding it together? And I could see the pain in his face, but he didn't shed a tear. And I thought, wow, that's a real way to respect your mum and your dad passing. And I sometimes look at that and think, well, how would I want my kids to... So first of all, how am I going to respond when I've got to take that baton? I hope I can respond with the same honour and strength, courage. And then I think, and I hope my kids do too. Because, you know, like, if I passed, the last thing I'd want to do is for my kids for their life to fall to pieces. I almost want them to raise a glass of champagne every, you know, on my anniversary. People do that, don't they? They raise a whiskey or a beer or whatever it is, a wine or whatever. And I think that is the way to do it. But I think about all that kind of stuff. What about you?
Funny you say about that. I remember my dad burying his dad, and again, you'd almost feel like it's you're next in line a little bit now. Do you know what I mean? It's coming, the book's kind of coming to you type thing, and he was the same in what you've just spoke about. And do you know what's weird for me when it comes to death? And I'd be interested to know if anyone's had a death in the family and they feel this way, but I've got a weird thing about death for when I get to 36, because that was how old my mum was when she died. I've got this weird thing about turning 36. And it's only as I'm getting older.
Are you getting worried about it?
I wouldn't say I was worried. It's not even an anxiety. It's just this weird feeling of like, I know I'm getting older, and I just think then of my dad getting older, and a little bit like of, what the fuck am I gonna do when he goes type thing. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a worry, but it is something that as I'm getting older, I think the death of a parent is something that I think is definitely more in my mind than maybe ever before. Yeah.
And coming back to it, it's how you're going to react. Coming back to what we just talked about a second ago, I always think, how do I put things in place now so that I have a better reaction at the time? So, you know, I'm busy, but I make sure that every August, when I go away with my immediate family, my wife and kids, we take Zeri's mum and dad. So Zeri's mum and dad are parted, so we'll take Zeri's mum for a weekend, so she gets to spend time with her daughter and her grandkids. Then she flies back, and her dad and his new family come out, and then my mum and dad come out. So I make sure that we do that every year, because I think memories.
Oh yeah.
You know, I have very few memories of my granddad, but what I do have is like, there's things I've took, morals, old school morals really, of how he behaved, more than I've got a million memories of what happened. So I try to create memories for the grandkids as well. I have this grandchildren, grandparent guilt, because I'm the bridge in the middle, right? So I try to, that's another take on what we're talking about really, to make sure that the grandkids get enough time. Yeah. Because I lost my granddad. So I have that. But I make sure I do that every year to create those memories. I also make sure that we spend Christmas Day together every year. And the other thing that I try to do, and I know you've done this with your dad, but the first thing is with my mum, is I try to take my mum somewhere where it's just me and her once a year. And the best thing I've ever done is the Northern Bell train. So have you ever been on it? No. So it's like a sister train of Orient Express.
Oh, I've heard of that one, yeah.
Right. So it goes all over the country, but it's a full day where you sit opposite one another. And here's one thing. How much time do you spend with somebody that's quality? Because if I go around my mum and dad, half the time I'm throwing the kids at them. The second part, the kids are playing and I think, oh, I'll get on my phone and I'm flicking through. It's the same old thing, or watching the telly. So I try to make once a year where me and my mum go on the train, and it's all day. So they might take you from Manchester to York or Liverpool to I don't know where, but they take you a scenic way, and you have a 3-course dinner, and you have wine and beers, champagne if you want to drink it, and they have shows on the train. But you just get that one-to-one time, 1 metre away, where you can't get a signal. And I think those are the kind of things. I took my dad to Vegas, and obviously you did the same. I try to do those things. And it helps with the guilt. And I think it's all built up for me to, at the end, when I look back, will I have done my best? Because we're all busy.
Yeah, yeah.
What kind of things do you do? I mean, you took in Vegas, didn't you?
Yeah, done with Vegas. And I do have a big guilt on it type thing. And I see him every day. Do you know what I mean? I have a coffee with him every single day. And you know what's... And I respect this a lot from people who can go and... who can go and live their life a bit more, because if my dad wasn't around, I wouldn't think twice about moving away. But I don't think I could ever move away whilst he's here. Yeah, I've got friends who've moved to Australia or New Zealand and went travelling and done this and done that. I rather embarrassingly, I'm so kind of, I don't know whether it's losing my mum's give me this, but I feel so much guilt about kind of straying too far, do you know what I mean? So on one hand, I want to kind of live my life and take him with me and let him explore the world with me, if you like. I do feel like a tremendous guilt if I'm, leaving him out a little bit, which is a bit weird, but yeah, that's kind of something I'll feel. And it's weird because I don't want my little girl to have that same guilt that I have, if you know what I mean, because I would
exactly what you mean.
I would hate my little girl to get an opportunity to go to bloody Australia or work in South America or travel North America, and she's like, "Well, can't leave me, Dad." I would hate it if she thought that.
You've just took the words right out of my mouth, what I was about to say, really, with that specific, which is, I try to put myself in the place of what I would want to think, what I would want my kids to do, or what I would want to pass to them. And so I think whilst I've never moved far away from my mum and dad, you've never moved far away from your dad now, I would absolutely have no problem whatsoever with my kids moving to America or wherever they want to move to. And I think sometimes if you do have that guilt over your parents, I think you've just got to, or what I do is the mechanism I use is I really try to put myself into their position to think, what would they want, and what would I want passing the baton down. And I think 99 times out of 100, all your parents want is for you to be happy, to do what's best. So you shouldn't really have guilt if you didn't see your dad next week. You shouldn't have guilt if you wanted to move to Australia. Because I actually think your parents have got the same philosophy you've got over your kid. It's just we look at it differently because you're looking up rather than down.
No, 100%. I think as well, I mean, I can't speak too much in this because I've never had to be through it, but I can imagine that guilt as well probably it would intensify, you know, when it comes to like I don't know, nursing homes, you know, they're getting elderly and sick and things like that. And I remember when my mum was in hospital, she was diagnosed in the May with leukemia, passed away in September, so I had like a 12 to 13, that kind of summer holidays of going from year 7 to year 8, just visiting the hospital every day. I felt this tremendous guilt that when all my friends were going to play out in the 6 weeks holidays, I had to go to the hospital. And there were some days that my mum said, listen, don't come in tomorrow, I'm fine, go and play with your mates. And then I'd be out with my mates just feeling so guilty that I didn't go and see my mum. So do you know what I mean? I think it probably intensifies even more when obviously we get older and our parents get sick. And I just think it's a fascinating one. You know, we spoke about parent guilt, but there's a guilt that lies there, you know, the other way around when it comes to our parents, which probably everyone feels, but again, not really. I don't think I've ever had this conversation before.
I don't think I've ever had the conversation, and yet it's something that I think about constantly, but subconsciously. I think I might have just repeated this, but the way I deal with it is the way I deal with a lot of things. I always try to put myself at the end game, whether it's the end of my life, and think, was I a good dad? I put myself at the end of my life and think, did I behave with integrity? Did I hold correct morals? I go to the end of the time where my mum and dad will eventually not be here and think, have I done as much as I could? And I think that's
to make
the
them proud, I think as well. That's got to be one that, because again, as a parent, what they will be thinking, like you're saying, putting the shoe on the other foot, they will want to have raised a man who has, you know, been successful, who's been happy, who's lived his life the way he wanted to, etc. And if you've done all that, then they've done the job. They'll be happy.
I think you just said live the life as you want. I think that's what they want for you, and I think that's what you should do. Sometimes I might get it wrong, right, because I think, I've got to just show them. Sometimes all they want is to have a cup of coffee. Maybe my dad wants more cups of coffee with me than he wants to see how well I'm doing. Do you get what I mean? I think sometimes, again, we get this twisted idea of what they want us to do, and it's our twisted idea. And there you go. That's my thoughts on that anyway. It's an interesting one.
Really interesting. I think as well, the take home I've got from that is probably people being a bit harsh on themselves as well, you know, because you can, like you say, you can overthink it, you can twist it, and you can think, am I being a good son, a good daughter? Oh, can I do more? And I think you're probably overthinking it, and probably that phone call or a coffee will probably suffice, I think, as well. You can. Good on that, Anna. Thank you for sending that in. And again, keep all the comments and feedback coming in, and we'll rattle through them. But much appreciated as always, and we'll see you next week.